From the darkest reaches of space to the deepest corners of your mind. Welcome to From the Void.
I grew up a massive fan of the TV show The X-Files. I know, that dates me, but I don't care. The show is amazing and I still go back and watch it. For those of you who are familiar with that show, one of the two main characters is an FBI agent named Fox Mulder. Growing up, I wanted to be Fox Mulder. However, no one told me they don't actually have a section of the FBI that solely investigates the paranormal. So what do you do if you're a real-life FBI agent interested in things like ghosts and UFOs? Well, you leave your job at the FBI and you follow your dreams. This week's guest did that very thing. The incredibly kind and generous Ben Hansen left his job at the FBI to investigate the strange and unusual. You may have seen him on shows like Ghost Hunters, Fact or Faked Paranormal Files, UFOs Declassified, UFO Witness, Expedition Bigfoot, Roswell, The Final Verdict, Alien Encounters Declassified, and more. So welcome to this week's mystery, Ben Hansen, UFO Witness, on From the Void. All right, welcome to the podcast. This week, I'm very excited to have one of my favorite TV personalities, Ben Hansen. Thank you for spending some time with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, like I said, we were talking before we started recording. I started following your career, I think, around the time of Fact or Faked, and have consequently continued to watch some of the shows. You've come out with some recently. Obviously, UFO Witness was outstanding, and then Roswell, The Final Verdict. So tell me a little bit about your background. You have a background that includes working for the FBI. So what got you interested in the paranormal field?
Well, the paranormal, and in that I would say, you've got UFOs, ghosts, Bigfoot. It used to mean everything, and then people started kind of subdividing it, and paranormal was just ghosts. And anyways, the whole mystery genre I was into ever since I was like 5 years old, and really started reading books when I was 8. About 14 years old, I kind of set it aside, but then it kind of entered my life again in college, and started doing ghost investigating and showing up at these UFO conferences and things. And so the when I went into investigating child sex crimes and my degree with criminology and all that, it's not like I gave it up, but you can't officially be parts of groups and stuff while you're working for the government, for obvious reasons. It's a point of I guess ridicule. A lot of people, like when you're testifying in court, like, well, don't you belong to this group too? And so then they try to shoot your credibility down, which is ridiculous. So anyways, when I stopped working for the government, the TV shows and things have really allowed me an opportunity to do this full time. And the UFO subject is something probably that I'd say most passionate about, that I know most about, although I've done everything from investigating mermaids, to basically leprechauns and time travel and everything else.
That's fascinating. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because you're right. For a long time, for decades, really, as soon as you mention even the term UFO, it elicits giggles. And I mean, we saw that press conference recently where a reporter was asking Jen Psaki, about, is the government going to start to release documentation on, what we know about UFOs, and couldn't get through the entire question without giggling. And so it has been a point of ridicule. So it's interesting that you say that. So when you started investigating, Did you have a personal experience that really kind of got you interested in it, or really kicked it off?
No, I was kind of backwards. I know some people have an experience and then they go look for answers. I sort of had, questions, and then I had my experiences. So I didn't even learn until later that my grandfather was kind of entwined in this with. I've talked about his work a lot. He used to work at and you're up in generally in Ohio, right?
Yes. Yep. Central Ohio. Yep.
Yeah. So he had temporary duty assignments with the Air Force at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So, excuse me. So a lot of people who kind of know the UFO subject know that Wright-Patterson was and is what was at the time the Foreign Technology Division, and before that it was there were different names for it. But Roswell, in that crash in 47, we can show that a lot of that debris, what flight it went on, where it stopped, and where it ended up at Wright-Patterson. And so here's my grandfather working in the mid 60s, and he had an assignment, which he wouldn't tell us exactly what it was, but he would leave at a moment's notice and had to just go, and he couldn't tell my dad when he'd be back. And he was working underground. Wright-Patterson still today denies they have an underground complex. It is a very big complex underground. I don't know why they deny this, but a lot of this was taking place underground. So at any rate, I learned through my dad years later that Grandpa was involved in this, and that he possibly might have known a lot of what was going on. And that family connection really got me interested, even more so than I already was. But I did have a couple sightings, and I had one with my dad. I've had one with my wife. I feel pretty lucky that I've seen the things I have, and I don't know if that's common or if I'm just more inclined to look at the sky and to see that something's unusual where a lot of people wouldn't see it.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about, your training obviously within the FBI, obviously that seems to come in handy, when you're out investigating on these TV shows. And one of the things I've always appreciated about your work is the fact that, you don't just immediately jump to UFO or aliens. You look at it through a skeptical lens, and especially with Fact or Faked, one of the things you guys did was try to debunk some, or see at least if you could kind of recreate the phenomenon. So talk a little bit about what kind of things you learned along the way in your career that kind of lent themselves to these types of investigations.
Yeah, I think people are fooling themselves if they don't accept the fact that nearly, and I'd say like with UFOs is about 95% at least, nearly all these things are explainable. A lot of people don't know that they're looking at Chinese lanterns. They don't know what military flares look like, and so it's not necessarily, there's a percentage that hoax things, but most people just don't know what they're looking at. And so we're fooling ourselves if we just jump to the conclusion that it's all extraterrestrial. The other small percentage, we do try to replicate videos and things, to eliminate, so that what's left is the real gold, right? When it's completely unexplainable. And I don't know why some people aren't even interested in that. They really truly jump into the pool of what people say are believers. And I'm like, well, just because you have a belief in something, it makes it more of a probability percentage, not that everything from there on out has to be true. So I tell people, don't disbelieve it because you haven't heard it before, but don't believe everything you hear either. So that's kind of where I stand, and my training from my previous, careers, I didn't do any of this stuff. Obviously, it had nothing to do with this, but I did talk to a lot of people, thousands of people, of victims and perpetrators of really horrible stuff. And if anything, I think it kind of gives me an insight to be able to get information, make people feel comfortable. And then also deception detection is an interesting hobby of mine. I like to know if people are telling me the truth. And there's a number of different ways that we can do that.
Well, that's the perfect segue, Ben. Good job. I want to talk about, because one of the things in terms of deception detection that I thought was absolutely fascinating was this recent show that you did called Roswell, The Final Verdict. And for one thing, number one, there was an astounding number of potential firsthand witnesses that were interviewed at some point or another on camera, more than I thought, that we had, honestly. And then the part of the show, though, was using some sort of analytical software that kind of helped determine whether or not they were being truthful. That was absolutely fascinating. So what was kind of talk about that a little bit, first of all, and then talk about kind of your takeaway from kind of analyzing all of those different interviews when it comes to really the granddaddy of all UFO cases.
Yeah, and it is. Roswell is the iconic, most well-known case, probably the most well-documented. And this company, I think, did a really good job. The production company was a UK company that I think did a really good job putting this together. I was kind of invited later in the process after they'd filmed a lot of this, and they presented it to me and said, "Hey, are you interested in this concept?" And I said, "Well, look, I love Roswell. I've been there several times. I'm still actively helping research the area. But what new leads do you have? Because the problem is this happened nearly, 74 years ago. And nearly all, I can't even tell you one witness I know of, a primary witness that's still alive. And so if these people aren't alive anymore, and you don't have them to sit them down in, let's say, a chair to do a polygraph exam, then what other technologies can we use?" And they're like, "Listen to this," right? They tell me that they got in touch with Dartmouth College and University of Maryland. They developed a AI, artificial intelligence program called DARE. And DARE basically uses 4 modalities, and I geek out about this stuff, but it looks at micro expressions of the face, which was developed by Paul Ekman, who was the consultant Lie to Me, that TV show.
Yeah.
That's all based on his research, where you look at little inflections of the face that happen in microseconds. So this program is very good at detecting these things which have been associated to stress and deception. It looks at those. It also looks at the tonality and stress in the voice, and then also the content of what they're saying. Then a human interprets this and puts it all together with the numbers, and they found in the studies that it's up to 92% accurate. 92%. Wow. So you take the polygraph, on its best days is like 95%, according to the white paper studies. And I said, okay, you got me sold. Like, we have something here that's academic. It's not some app on your phone.
Right.
There are scientists behind this who have developed it, and the government's using it as for contractors now. So when you put these videos through this algorithm, you get a really high probability. It's not perfect, but a real high probability that, let's say you have, for example, did you see a body that was non-human? Did you recover debris that folded up in your hand and had a memory metal? Did you see this? Did you see that? When you have 4, 5, 6, 7 people saying the same thing, and that the AI software is saying that they're telling the truth, that's huge. That's really big. And so that's what I loved about the program. And it also is a great introduction for people who only know Roswell just because they've heard about it through pop culture. And I'm like, no. You got to do what a lot of people don't do anymore, is pick up a book and you got to read it.
Yeah.
And if you don't have time to do that, watch this series, because it's a really good compilation of the whole story of Roswell.
Yeah, it does a really thorough job of kind of telling the story behind what happened. There were some details and some nuance to it that I wasn't even aware of, and I've been reading this stuff since I was a kid. So was there any part of that show or any part of the interviews that were analyzed that really kind of surprised you, I guess?
Yeah, I think there was. There was a couple things. Okay, let's take like this Glenn Dennis. So he's a mortician, and his story was that he's also the ambulance driver in town. And he gets this call from the airbase, and they say to him, hey, they start asking weird questions like, do you have any child-size hermetically sealed caskets. How many do you think you can get? He's like, why are you asking this? What about if a body's been, exposed to the elements for a long time? What's the best way to preserve it? And so he's like, well, this is kind of odd. And then he happens to be taking what he says an airman in the ambulance, taking them to the hospital there on base. And he stumbles upon the scene where there's a lot going on in the hangar, and they're collecting debris, which he sees in the back of 2 ambulances, and catches a nurse on the way out of one of these double doors who's like, get out of here, you got to get out of here, and she's holding a handkerchief over her mouth. He meets up with the nurse later, and she draws a picture of the autopsy, that they're performing. So this is his story. The AI confirms that he was telling the truth about the phone call from the base, about the caskets, that he was on base, but it shows that he's probably being deceptive about why he was there. And so some people will take a testimony like that and throw the whole thing out and say, okay, well, he's lying then, right? The whole thing isn't true. But people have a number of reasons why they lie. Now, I wish every witness was told up front and straightforward about it. But the theory here is that he knew this nurse. He already knew her. He was having some sort of maybe an affair with her. And that's why he indicated deception on those parts. But as to the rest of it, it gels with what other people were saying. So that's kind of one of the surprises.
Interesting. Yeah, and it seems like the overwhelming majority of people who were interviewed about different facets of this case were deemed to be truthful, which lends to the fact that like this probably did happen. Like there was some sort of craft. It was not some sort of balloon or government experiment. Like this was an actual recovered craft.
Well, anybody who doesn't even see the series, right, or anything that was laid out with the AI, you have to look by definition. Roswell is a conspiracy. It is, because officially the Air Force gives 4 different explanations. 4, you could count even 5 different explanations of what it was. They immediately release, and this doesn't just come by some arbitrary, whimsical. Hey, just go tell the public we captured a flying disc. You think that they're just going to go say that unless it comes from higher ups who think and deliberate, and they're like, finally, it appears in the newspaper, the Army Air Force has captured a flying disc. Within hours, it's recanted, okay, and then it becomes a weather balloon, and we have witnesses saying they were there when they put the weather balloon debris and told they had to say the story. And then years later, the Mogul weather balloon thing comes out, and then another thing about crash test dummy. So they've changed their story so many times, you have to ask yourself, if this simply was a government experiment or some weather balloon of some sort, why the death threats? Why the changing of the story so many times? And there's something bigger at play, and that everyone has to agree upon, right? And then we go from there, and it's like, what was it? Well, hey, if you're interested to look at the evidence, we have dozens and dozens of people who say that it was not from this world.
What's interesting about that too is a lot of the skeptics now, especially as obviously part of the reason you're busy right now is because the UFO phenomenon has taken to the front page. I mean, the New York Times, the Washington Post, I believe Politico as well, published articles confirming that the Navy said, yeah, there are these objects in the sky that can outmaneuver us, and we don't know what they are. And so suddenly it's kind of hit the mainstream, and people who maybe wouldn't have taken it seriously before are starting to take it seriously now. But skeptics are still saying, hey, like, wait a minute, like this could very well just be the government yet again lying to us, but using UFOs as a way to cover up perhaps the testing of some new technology. What are your thoughts on that? Like, obviously you've been doing a ton of researching and a ton of investigating. What is there some element of truth there, do you think, or do you think we're really seeing something from another world?
Yeah, I think there is an element of truth there, and I'll tell you why. First of all, the hard skeptics they were silent when the government came out with this. They were like, oh, Okay, so now we have to admit the phenomenon's going on. Okay, great. So we'll admit it. But then, like you said, they went to the next step. And now they're trying to, a lot of them explain it all away as simply government experiments. And I'll tell you why that's partly true, partly not. So really quick, if people are familiar with the Tic Tac video, the Navy video, you had jets that were scrambled. You had career military officers, very trustworthy people. You have radar operators. You have all these people, okay? It's not just visually seeing it. It's not just having the camera footage. It's the radar footage, the radar data, where these things were traveling from 5,000 miles altitude and going down to the seafloor in less than a second. They would disappear in one place and reappear 60 miles away on radar. They would turn on a dime. They would hover. So the capabilities of the G-forces, I think they estimated up to 700 or so G-forces, okay, to do this stuff. If you want to believe that that's Russia or North Korea or China, and that is your belief that they are so far advanced of us to be able to do this, then you're in a very scary world. I mean, I hope that it's not them, because we are so far behind if that's the case. So, and those types of incidents and videos, I absolutely think it's a horrible case to try and say that that's one of our adversaries or ours. We simply do not have that technology or grasp on it. Now, on the other hand, last year, and I believe in 2019, we had a swarm of drone sightings. It happened in Colorado, Nebraska. We were getting them off the coast of the Pacific again, the USS Rosell. Some of these videos coming out show objects that are not showing non-conventional maneuvering. They're not hovering and stopping, but they are staying in the air for hours. And they're not able to track them. The anti-drones technology isn't being able to take them down. They don't know where they're coming from. They sort of, disappear on radar. I do think it's possible that some of this is terrestrial. And that it could be aeronautic companies testing out new things against ourselves or adversaries doing it to us to see what they can get away with. It's not out of the realm of like a terrestrial thing to say, yeah, we got stuff that's up for hours now and keeps up with a ship, and then it can take off and you can't find it, right? So there's your answer. I think that's conflating the two things. And we label them all as UAPs, where people want to categorize it and dismiss it because they'll take an example of the drones, they're calling them, say, see, this could be this and this could be that, and therefore the whole thing is explained. Like, go back to the Tic Tac videos, go back to what they're saying about these things. They could be totally different stuff that's going on, but we kind of put them all in the same box.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I know we're running short on time. So before I let you go, tell people a little bit about where they can keep up on top of what you're up to and what are you working on next?
Yeah, so most of everything I announce through my social media. I'm on Twitter and Facebook and easily found. My website's benhansen.com, and it's Hansen. So I post things on there too. Nearly everything that I'm creating right now is have a really good relationship with Discovery Plus and the Travel Channel, because I really love that this network is embracing this and seeing that it's important, that people want to know. So we have a lot of UFO content, especially UFO stuff coming out. And like you've mentioned, the Roswell series is up on Discovery Plus. Alien Invasion Hudson Valley, was put up there. I believe it was just about 2 weeks ago. And then we have a new one. I think it's September 6th. And it's called Alien Encounters Declassified. It's the 6th or the 7th. So that's cool. The next thing that'll be up there. And then the secret things I can't talk about yet will be announced when they're ready to be. But a lot of UFO good stuff happening.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I like I said, huge fan. We'll continue to follow your career. Encourage everyone to go check out all the programs that are already out. But thanks again for coming on, Ben. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, John, for having me.
My job isn't to convince you that UFOs are real or that aliens are real. But when you have someone credible, like a former FBI agent with access to newly declassified government documents on the topic, it stretches your reality just a little bit. As the public pushes for the release of more and more documents, hopefully we'll continue to get more answers that explain just what it is we're seeing in the skies. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. If you enjoy the show, help us get noticed by leaving a 5-star review on iTunes and spreading the word. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a future episode of the show. We'll be back very soon with a brand new season, so until then, stay safe, stay vigilant, and keep an open mind. Thanks for listening to From the Void.